It is 11 p.m. Person A opens their banking app, sees the number, and closes it without reading it. They've done this every night for 3 years. The number hasn't gotten better. They earn $75,000 a year. They work hard, and they genuinely cannot tell you where the money goes. Person B, same city, same age, earns $45,000. Their phone is across the room. They're reading. They have 6 months of expenses. In a separate account, they've named something embarrassing. And they're thinking, genuinely, non-theoretically thinking, about leaving their job next year to build something. Same city, same age, completely different financial lives. And if your first instinct is to assume that person A has a spending problem and person B has discipline, that is the assumption this video is here to dismantle. Because what separates these two people is not character, it is not willpower, it is a cost structure that person A has never seen and person B has spent years making visible. I am Mount. I spent years working inside financial systems, investment research, fund operations, accounting work. I've seen how money moves, and more importantly, I've watched it disappear from people who had no idea. It was leaving. What I want to show you today is the specific architecture that makes it possible for a $250,000 salary to produce zero financial security, and 3 rules that actually change the math, not the mindset. Stay until the end. I have 10 specific actions for you. Not principles, not encouragement, actual structural changes you set up once and that run without you having to be a better person every morning. Here is where we start. One number, according to a 2025 YouGov survey, 82% of Americans say they feel stressed about debt. Not 30%. Not a majority. 82%. And Experian put total U.S. consumer debt at $18.57 trillion, with the average person carrying roughly $105,000 in total obligations. Meanwhile, Capital One shopping research found that the average American spends $3,381 per year on impulse purchases alone, things they didn't plan to buy. Nearly $300 a month. Gone, with nothing to show for it that they actually needed. Now here is the number that should stop you. 33% of Americans earning over $250,000 a year are still living paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 3, making $250,000, still stressed, still no buffer, still one bad month away from a real problem. Read that again. If income were the variable that determined financial security, that number would be impossible. It isn't impossible, it is documented. Which means income is not the variable. Something else is. That something else is your cost structure. Specifically, the hidden cost structure, built into everything you own, and it runs whether you look at it or not. Rule 1, everything you own is billing you. You just never got the invoice. Picture a closet. Not a metaphorical one. Your closet. Or a closet you can see clearly in your mind. There is a jacket in there. Maybe it is $300, maybe it is more. You wore it once to something specific, and then it went back in and it has been there since. Every time you open the door, you see it. You don't think about it, but it is there. Here is what is actually happening. That $300 jacket isn't a past purchase. It is an ongoing financial relationship, and you never read the terms. The honest accounting works like this. Cost divided by uses equals cost per use. And that is the only real price tag on anything you own. The jacket you wore once costs $300 per use. If you wore it 30 times over 2 years, it costs $10. The object is identical. Your relationship to it determines its actual price. This is what I call the single-use cost formula. And once you run it on your wardrobe, your garage, your kitchen, you will not be able to stop running it. But cost per use is still just the visible layer. There is a second billing cycle nobody talks about. Think about the spare bedroom that has become a storage room, the garage that fits everything except a car, the stationary bike in the corner of your bedroom, the one with the hoodie draped over the handlebars. and a thin layer of dust on the screen. That bike isn't furniture. That bike is a tenant. It occupies roughly 12 square feet of space you are paying for every single month. If your rent or mortgage works out to $3 per square foot, that bike is costing you $36 a month, $432 a year to sit there. With your hoodie on it, that is what I call the storage tax. And it runs on every object in your home that isn't pulling its weight. Now, here is why this is so hard to see. And I want to be clear. This is not a character flaw. When you bought the bike, or the guitar, or the camera, or the bread maker you used 4 times, you weren't just buying an object. You were buying a future version of yourself. A version that works out every morning, that plays music, that bakes bread on Sunday. The object felt necessary because it was proof that version of you was coming. And getting rid of it now means admitting something uncomfortable. The future self you paid for has probably moved on without you. Researchers call this ideal self-preservation. The brain would rather keep paying storage rent on a fiction than confront the fact that the fiction has expired. But underneath that mechanism, there is something even more specific. It is not just optimism about a future self. It is fear. Fear of being the kind of person who bought something and didn't use it. Fear of what that says about you. This isn't about the bike. A version of this conversation might go. It is about not wanting to admit I was wrong about who I was going to become. When you can name that fear precisely, it loses some of its power over your wallet. Here is the math, so you can feel what this actually costs. The average American spends $3,381 per year on impulse purchases. Run that forward at 7% annual return over 20 years. That is not $67,000 of compounded regret. That is $160,000. $160,000 grown from things that, if you asked each person who bought them, most would say they didn't need and rarely used. That is not a rounding error. That is a down payment. That is 4 years of a child's college tuition. That is the financial margin that would let you walk away from something that is slowly making you miserable. Let that land. Rule 2. The reset test. There is a question I want you to sit with. If you had to move tomorrow, new apartment, completely empty, nothing carried forward, would you go out and specifically buy this thing again? Not. Could you imagine using it someday? Not. It was expensive, and it seems wasteful to get rid of it. The question is, you today, with your actual life, your actual schedule, your actual priorities, would you walk into a store and choose to purchase this exact object? If the answer is anything other than a clear yes, then you are paying monthly to maintain. A decision that your current self would not make. That is what the reset test reveals. And when you run it across your subscriptions, your memberships, your wardrobe, your furniture, what you find is that a meaningful portion of your monthly cost structure is dedicated to a lifestyle that was designed by a past version of you. One who had different circumstances, different ideas about who they were becoming, and you have been funding that past version on autopilot. Without ever scheduling a review, this is where lifestyle inflation actually hides. Not in the obvious upgrades, in all the small commitments that were never canceled when your life moved on. The streaming service from when your evenings looked different. The gym membership from when your schedule allowed it. The subscription box you signed up for during a version of yourself that no longer exists. 30% of adults surveyed by CNBC and LendingTree admitted they regularly spend money on things they don't need. 21% said their spending exceeds their income every month. These aren't people who don't understand math. They understand math. The problem is the cost structure is on autopilot, and no one ever built in a reset point. The reset test is that reset point. It is not asking whether something is good. It is asking whether you would choose it today. And those are very different questions. I want to say something here that most financial content won't. Everything I am describing only works if there is margin to work with. If your income doesn't meet your basic needs. The problem isn't your object inventory. That is a structural problem that needs a different conversation entirely. And I am aware of that. For everyone who is earning more than they were 3 years ago and still not getting ahead, the cost structure is almost always where the answer lives. Rule 3. Define enough before the money arrives. Here is the mechanism behind that 33% number. High earners living paycheck to paycheck. It is not that they spend recklessly, most of them don't. It is that they never set a ceiling. And without a ceiling, income and expenses do something entirely predictable. They rise together. The raise comes, the apartment upgrades, the car upgrades, the restaurants get slightly more expensive, the vacations get slightly longer, and the gap between what comes in and what goes out stays exactly the same. Sometimes it closes. There is a doctor in a white coat investor community thread who describes this precisely. Spent a decade earning $60,000 a year through residency. Then the salary hit $300,000. First thing, BMW. Second thing, house upgrade. I'd waited long enough, they wrote. I'd earned it. 5 years later, no meaningful financial buffer. The income had quintupled. The savings rate was essentially unchanged. This is not a story about bad values. It is a story about what happens when arrival looks like a specific set of objects and experiences, and you've been told for a decade that you deserve them. The spending isn't reckless. It is the logical conclusion of a belief the system spent years installing. Joshua Milburn, one half of the minimalists, was earning a 6-figure salary when he carried 6 figures of debt. He didn't solve it by earning more. He defined what enough actually looked like, reduced his fixed costs, and cleared the debt in 2 years. Same career, same city. The income didn't change. The architecture did. Here is the structural move. Define your enough ceiling before the raise arrives, not after before. Open a notes app right now and write down the monthly spending number that would constitute a genuinely good life for you, not your aspirational life, your actual life with the things and experiences that actually matter to you. Write that number, then commit to holding it regardless of what your income does. Every dollar that arrives above that ceiling gets moved automatically to a savings or investment account. Before you see it in your checking balance, that is not deprivation. That is what it looks like to decide what enough means for yourself before the system decides it for you. There is a line that appears in various forms across personal finance communities, and I keep coming back to it. I can look wealthy, or I can build wealth. I can't do both. I have to choose. That is not a call to minimalism aesthetics. That is a precise statement about resource allocation. The money you spend performing financial success, the car that signals arrival, the apartment that says you made it, the wardrobe that communicates a certain kind of person competes directly with the margin that would give you actual choices. And the performance is expensive. It is, in many cases, the most expensive thing a person buys. Here is what the alternative actually feels like. Not in theory. Specifically, you walk into work on a Tuesday. Your manager says something that used to make you swallow your response, and this time, you don't. Not because you became braver, because you have 8 months of expenses in an account. And the cost of walking out is one you can actually afford. The conversation is different when the financial exit exists, or you are offered a deal that requires you to compromise something that matters to you. You say no, not with a speech, just no, and you mean it because you are negotiating from a surplus and not from need. That is a different kind of person to be in a room with, and it is a different life to live. Every dollar held in reserve is a future decision that stays yours. Now, here are 10 things to actually do. Right now, this week. Rule 1. Calculate cost per use before every purchase. Before you buy any physical object that isn't consumable, take 30 seconds and estimate how many times you will realistically use it. In the next 12 months, not optimistically, realistically, divide the price by that number. A $200 item used 5 times is $40 per use. A $60 item used 60 times is $1. Write the cost, per use number on a sticky note and put it on the object before you decide. If the number feels wrong, the purchase is wrong. Rule 2. Remove your saved payment detail from every retail site you use tonight. Before you sleep, open Amazon, your most used shopping apps, and your browser's autofill settings and delete every saved card. Manual card entry takes about 40 seconds. That 40 seconds is friction, and friction is the only thing standing between wanting something and owning it in modern retail. The engineers who built one-click checkout were paid millions of dollars, specifically to eliminate that 40 seconds you are putting it back. This takes 10 minutes across all your accounts and works immediately. Rule 3. Run the reset test on every recurring charge this week. Pull up your bank and credit card statements for the last 90 days. Write down every charge that appears more than once. For each one, ask, if this disappeared tomorrow, and I had to actively go resubscribe, would I? Not could I justify it, would I go do it? Anything that gets a pause or a no gets canceled this week. You can always reinstate. Set a calendar reminder 30 days out to check if you missed it. Most people don't miss it. Rule 4. Calculate your storage tax. Today, walk through your home and estimate what percentage of your usable space, closets, spare rooms, garage, shelving, is occupied by things you haven't actively used in the past 6 months. Multiply your monthly rent or mortgage by that percentage. If 20% of your space stores things you don't use and your housing costs $2,500 a month, you are paying $500 a month to house objects. Name one specific object right now, the one that takes up the most space and delivers the least value, and decide what happens to it. Sell it, donate it, or discard it, but make the decision before you go to sleep tonight. Rule 5. Set your enough ceiling in the next 24 hours. Open your Notes app and write down one number, the monthly spending total that would constitute a genuinely good life for you. Not a compromise and not an aspiration. Your actual life, with the things that actually matter. Write the number, date it, share it with one person. This converts an abstract intention into a specific commitment with a witness. Before your next income increase of any kind, set up an automatic transfer for the difference between your new income and that ceiling amount, routed directly to a savings or investment account, timed to land the same day your paycheck does. Rule 6. Automate the margin before you see it. Log into your bank account now. Go to the transfers or payments section and schedule a recurring automatic transfer to a savings account, separate from checking, ideally at a different institution, so the money requires 2 business days to access. For the morning after each paycheck lands, start with a number that feels slightly uncomfortable, not impossible. You will adjust your spending to whatever remains in checking. This works because it removes the decision entirely from the moment when the money is visible. And the temptation is highest. Rule 7. Put the 72 hold on unplanned purchases. When you feel the impulse to buy something you didn't intend to buy before you opened the app or walked into the store, don't add it to a cart, add it to a plain text note. In your phone with today's date, come back to it in 72 hours. If you still want it, buy it. Most of the time you won't. Consumer behavior research consistently shows that impulse purchases feel genuinely optional. Within 24 to 48 hours, the whole doesn't tell you not to buy things. It tells you to buy them when you actually want them, not when an algorithm decided you did. Rule 8. Sell one reset test failure this week. Pick the object in your home that most clearly fails the reset test, the one you would most honestly not go out and repurchase today. Take 3 photos of it. Write 2 sentences describing it, and list it on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist before Friday. The goal isn't the money, though the money is real. The goal is making the framework physical. One decision, executed, changes the way you walk through your home. Things that used to feel permanent start to look like choices. Rule 9. Have the enough conversation out loud. Find someone, a partner, a close friend, a sibling, and say this, in roughly these words: I've been thinking about what enough actually looks like for me financially right now, not someday. And I want to know what yours looks like too. That conversation is harder than it sounds. Because most people have never said the number out loud to another person. Saying it converts it from a private thought into a commitment. The number becomes real. Real things are easier to hold. Rule 10. Build one environment. Level spending rule that doesn't require a daily decision. Pick the spending category where you most consistently overspend: restaurants, online shopping, clothing, whatever it actually is for you, and create a rule that changes what is possible in that environment. Not what you intend to do. Examples: cash only for restaurants, with a fixed amount withdrawn at the start of the month. When it is gone, it is gone. Shopping apps moved off your home screen and into a folder 2 taps deep. A single designated day each week when non-essential purchases are allowed, and no other day. The rule has to be structural. Intention doesn't hold under pressure. A rule that changes the environment doesn't need to. What is your current monthly savings rate? Not the target, not what it was when things were going well. Right now, this month. Actually, drop it in the comments. I want to see where people honestly are.